Fine. Okay, we are starting. First of all, we're entering even a more strict lockdown as of Friday. So I'm gonna actually be at my house next week as well. So hopefully it'll be end quick. We can all hang out together here in Yerushalayim again. We're starting Sefer Shemot, Exodus, the Sefer Galut, Begu'ula, exile and redemption. It's paradigmical. Everything in the Torah is both archetypal and paradigmical, and we've gone over this before. The English does not do it justice. The Hebrew is done with a vav hipuch, which is changes the present tense. To the past tense, the future to the past, depending how what tense the vav is being put in front of them. You see that in the rest of Tanakh also, but modern Hebrew we don't see that, and that it ultimately leads to this idea of there being no time. That what is occurring what occurred back then is occurring now and will occur again in the future in various different levels and concepts and paradigms. But what's very interesting about the beginning of the Exodus of Shemot is, the Sefer the book is called Shemot, not Exodus. In Hebrew, Shemot is names, right? So Ve'ele Shemot, these are the names. And it goes of Bnei Yisrael, Haba'im Mitzrayma. Haba'im is present tense. Right? Didn't say Ba'u. Didn't say they came. Haba'im. Haba'im Mitzrayma. That come, not came, not will come, Et Yaakov, Ishu Beitu Ba'u. They came. The end of the word is present. The end of the sentence, end of the verse is present, past tense. But the Haba'im can be seen as a present tense, an indicator in Chassidut that this is an ongoing thing that happens. We know that Rav Nassan is very big on this, and we also know, I believe all the rabbis in Chabad wrote about this, but Mittler Rebbe, the second Rebbe in Chabad, also beautiful dissertations on this idea that the idea of falling into the Mitzrayim, the Mitzarim, coming down here constantly, and coming out of here is an ongoing process. That the historical process that took place thousands of years ago is actually just a physical expression for the panimi, the internal process all of us have to go through when we're in this world, and in a sense, is just the beginning structural movement, meaning what happened to the Israelites thousands of years ago, for the ongoing process of the nation and the whole world leaving Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim meaning the Mitzarim, the inability to see the Creator in the universe. Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yisachar, Zvulun, Ubenyamin, Dan, Naftali, Gad, Asher, Vehi, Kol Nefesh, Yotzei, Yarech, Yaakov, Shiv'im Nefesh, Yosef Hayev Mitzrayim. That we once again have a repetition of the end of Bereshit. That the Shiv'im Nefesh, right? They didn't list all of them, but they listed the names, right? Ele Shemot. Rav Nassan says on these names we were redeemed, meaning these names are more than just names of people. They're in a sense these are the Yesodot, these are the foundational bricks of the nation of Israel. And the 70, we've learned a few times that Rabbi Nachman says the 70 souls that went down, the idea that each of our soul, when we descend into this world, are born into a galut, an exile, a personal exile, and until the Mashiach comes, the world, the nation also feels this exile. Each and every generation, our souls are brought into this world in a state of exile, and in a state of klipa, of being covered over. And it's our lifetime of work that we must do to break out of this. The Buddhists call this transcendence or nirvana. We call it, or breaking out of samsara, right? The idea of the distorted universe. We say we're breaking out of Mitzrayim, the Mitzarim, the constricted space. The only difference is we have work to do down here and they don't. right? We have to actually use the tools of the mitzvot, the birurin, the filtering process that we actually have to undertake while we're down here to rectify the world. I mean, it's not just us who need to leave it. We actually have to have the world. We have to uplift the world to another consciousness. So we have our own personal space of the birurim, of the filtering, meaning good from bad, and then we have the very unique focus on uplifting the entire consciousness of the universe itself by leaving the Meitzarim, the constricted space, the Mitzrayim, the Mitzrim that Egypt gave us and still gives us. The Nassim says, the Ikar, the main galut, main exile is asfut, depression. And the more we try to fight against it, it seems the more it beats us down, right? The Meitzarim gets harder and harder, more constricted. And we see this right now in the universe that we're in, the last kind of ditch hope of Paro himself, meaning the Sitra Achra, the Yetzer Hara, the forces of darkness coming at us now at the end of days, is even stronger than ever before, right? Everybody thought Paro was gone. We get to Yam Suf, the Red Sea of Reeds, and there he is, boom, strung with all the soldiers right at the last second, gets smacked down. We're at that point now where in an emotional, psychological sense, our world now is falling apart. Our world is falling apart. People can't make ends meet, right? It's the world is beating everybody down. We have forced vaccinations or forced. All these things are happening. We don't even understand why, most of us, and it's really, 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 really tough. And this is exactly what's going on right now. And the main weapon of the Yetzer Hara, the main weapon that is going on here is the same weapon it used thousands of years ago. But now it's happening in a much more pinimi, much more internal way. No one's throwing babies into the Yam Suf. No one's throwing into the Nilus. But what they're doing is destroying our anonymity. They're creating anonymity first, destroying our each one of us is a special nekuda, special point of holiness, and we're being buried underneath the stresses of the false virus, false pandemic. There is a virus, but a false pandemic, I would say. There's a pandemic. It's a pandemic of fear and depression, and not understanding that there's a way out of this mess without conforming to authoritarian dictates. And we see the same thing. Am Yisrael didn't know what to do. Am Yisrael was stuck, and they had to build structures, and they didn't know what to do. They had it so good, and all of a sudden flipped like this. V'yakam melech chadash, and there stood another melech, al Mitzrayim, on Egypt. Asher lo yada et Yosef, and he didn't know Yosef. This is very important because there's a machloket in terms of who this melech was. Was he really the old melech, and he just said, I'm going to forget? And there's a lot of midrashim, without going into them, that have different points of views or fill in the historical context. But let's just take the simple point of view. There's a new melech. That didn't know Yosef, that didn't know the tzaddik. He didn't understand that the world is about connecting to the Almighty, connecting to the Creator, and instead he thought he was the Creator. And he separated us. And I understand that Yosef's kever, Yosef's Aron, one of his last weeks, in the bottom of the Nile. And Am Yisrael was connected. It actually understood its purpose by being drawn to the Tzaddik's kever. And it can continue in Mitzrayim as long as it can be connected to the Tzaddik's kever. What the new king did is say, no, that thing, the Yosef that you understood there to be there is no longer, you will not be connected to him. And therefore we lost that individuality of godliness, our own individual path to godliness that we couldn't have. The Baal Shem Tov says we had to go into exile to Mitzrayim to draw out the Otiot, the letters that fell into there at the time of the creation of the world. They fell into a makom, a place of tum'ah, of impurity, and we were sent down there one way or the other to draw them out, and they were given to us at the Torah through the Torah at Har Sinai. These are our shemot. These are our names. All of our names are contained in the Torah, and we find ourselves somewhere, somehow, each one of us in the pathways of the Torah in terms of self-discovery and self-connection, connection to the Almighty. The inability to see the Nekuda Tova, the good point in ourselves and others, was one of the main weapons, one of the main goals of the regime in Egypt. The regime in Egypt sought to basically break the ability to have an Ayin Tova, a good eye, when looking at another Jew, when ultimately looking at oneself. The last thing, the way the Yetzer wins, the way the Yetzer Hara wins, is by saying you have no hope. Yayush, give up. And many of us have. In this world, this mamash, in this world that really breaks us down and says, listen, there's really no point to going forward anymore. Just give in to this Borg mentality, which we're feeling now. So that's what it wants us to do. Like we get to the point where there's nothing really left. What's the point of continuing? And that's what happened to Am Yisrael. Am Yisrael went along with all this because they saw no hope of getting out. And every generation that went by, about 3 generations that went by, the idea that there'd be a leader that would come and reinvigorate the hope and reverse the abandonment of hope became a fairy tale. Everything about exile, we have to understand that the way that the Mitzrayim worked is nothing's changed, right? Nothing's changed. The way the Mitzrayim worked is the same way that the modern society in the Western world, predominantly the decadent part of the Western world, works. Because all exiles are based on the exile of Mitzrayim, of Egypt. That's where our sages tell us that. And the fact is the most powerful part, the weapons of the Sitra Achra, one of the most powerful weapons of the Sitra Achra is the koach of the medana, the koach of the imagination, power, the tool of the imagination. And it draws us to a level where we have to where we begin to falsely believe that the things that were fed are true. Career. There's really no difference between being enslaved in Egypt and being enslaved to a career. It doesn't mean that one shouldn't work. It means that the idea, what it does to us, it says that basically speaking, we spend our times down here chasing after things instead of breaking through the barriers of the exile itself. All money comes from Hashem, right? Nosson says, or Nosson teaches, that the soul, our nefesh, really, our neshama, our nefesh, which is the lowest part of our soul, the one which expresses itself in this world, in the physical world. It's our ratzon, it's our will, our drive to do things down here. It's drawn from the same source as money. It's wild. Everything begins in a state of holiness, and as it descends, so to speak, Haviyachol, so to speak. Obviously, it's not descending physically, but the ideas and the concepts are drawn and expressed into the physical world. That's where it flips from holiness to can fall into the anti-holiness, right? And money is that. Money is a mirage. But money is necessary, meaning money in order to create things down here, in order to do things and to have influence down here, meaning to fulfill our ratzon, to fulfill our will, which we're hopefully driving towards holiness. We can use money to do it. Money is like the fuel for the projects we want to undertake down here. But there's a flip side to this. It also can be flipped to this tool of the Yetzer Hara and the Sitra Achra as a ta'ava, a desire. How does it do that? To the koch of the medame, to the power of the imagination. And then we're stuck, because then we want more and more of it, to do more and more things with it. But there might not be things that we're supposed to be doing. And that's how the Mitzrayim of the present day, the Mitzrayim, the confined space in our minds works. We get drawn in and we want to actually buy the things that we're fed. What we do is then we empower the forces of evil in the world, because we give them the money to display more garbage for us to buy. Like bricks in a pyramid that we had to lay, or building. No different. V'yamararu et chayehem ba'avoda kasher b'chomer uvilvenim v'chol avoda b'sadeh et kol avodotam asher avdu b'hem b'farach. V'yamararu, right? Their lives became bitter in their hard work, in the chomer, in the physical, and the bricks, and in the field work, all the work that they did, and all the hard and strenuous work. They were constantly working. They never had free time. And that's what free time to think about what needs to happen. And we know that everything changes. Everything changes. We're going to skip a little bit. Everything changes when they begin to pray. Everything begins when they begin to pray. That the Moshe Rabbeinu is, there's so many different layers that we can go into. But one thing I do want to hit now, I'm going to make sure I want to hit this. That we have a scene here where Moshe Rabbeinu, he is adopted by Paro, and he's miraculously saved, and he grows up like a Mitzrayim, but he still knows he's a Yehudi, still knows he's a Jew, an Israelite, and he sees the Mitzri hit the Egyptian hit his brothers, one of his brothers, one of the Hebrews, one of the Israelites. And he looks this way and that way, and he sees that there's no other person. V'yach et ha-Mitzri v'yitnehu b'chol. He's v'yach. He wipes out the Mitzri. V'yach is a lashon, a language of not just hitting. V'yach is like in totality. It's gone. And what does he do? He buries him in the sand. It's a very powerful imagery here. And he goes out the next day. And to the Israelites are speaking. He say, now we're all going to get in trouble. And of course, we know he runs to Midian. But the transition here, that's the important part, is the transition we all have to kind of go through. Because Moshe Rabbeinu is the paradigm of Mashiach. He is the paradigm of leadership, an Israelite sort of leadership, which starts off at a level of confusion and darkness and breaks through it to see a path forward. But how does he do it? First, we have to recognize the fact that the Mitzriut, the idea of the cultural Mitzrayim, wasn't just on the outside of forced labor camps. The regime had embedded itself so deep inside, it was part of who the people were at that point. And so when you see what Moshe Rabbeinu does, the fen ko b'ko, he became a Mitzri through and through. And he saw there was no other person of Yach at the Mitzri. What Mitzri was he wiping out by killing this Mitzri? Himself. He was taking that part of himself and leaving it behind. And that's when the trigger happened. We began the change. We began to say, listen, this cultural oppression I have, this spiritual oppression I have, I can't be free on the outside until I let go of it and break through it and leave it behind. And he runs away to Midian to find himself. And it's in those moments where he goes to find himself. It's very powerful. I want to end on this note soon. I'll get the exact language. Sorry. The whole thing really begins with Moshe Rabbeinu. The Moshe Rabbeinu. Sorry. Here, the end of chapter 2. It goes back. The focus shifts from Midian, where Moshe Rabbeinu is. It's just back to Mitzrayim. It's just for a few verses, and it says, "Ve'hi v'yamim harabim ha'ehem v'yamat melech Mitzrayim v'anachu b'nei Yisrael min avodah v'ziaku v'ta'al shava'atam Elohim min ha'avodah." They screamed to Hashem. Am Yisrael screamed to Hashem because of their work. It's too much already. But look, it's more than that. They groaned. They let out a groan due to their work, and then they screamed. We know the Rebbe Nachman teaches that the groan, v'anachu, kretsk in Yiddish, is the most powerful, deep thing one can do. That you get to a point in life that you don't even have words anymore, but all you can do is have a kretsk, a groan, an anacha, and that opens up the gates. That groaning, I can't handle anymore, and that's what happened. And Hashem heard them, and He remembered. Obviously, He knew already. Yizkor Elohim et britot Abraham et Yitzhak et Yaakov. He remembered the covenant He made with the Avot, and God saw the Bnei Israel and Ve'eda Elohim. And then at that point, Moshe Rabbeinu sees the sneh, the burning bush. That's when he goes out and he takes everything. He appears. At that moment, the leader, right, began his next stage of awakening. And why I'm saying that is because each one of us has a piece of Moshe Rabbeinu inside of us, and each one of us can awaken ourselves and awaken the people around us. We don't have to stay at the level of Mitzrayim. We can break through. We can break out and get to Eretz Yisrael, despite the changes of the current global regime. The first stage is to bury that part of ourselves, which is really not who we are. Is to let go of the past, of the assumptions that are guiding us, and then from there we can move forward. Then we have to actually scream to Hashem for guidance. We have no choice. After we scream to Hashem for guidance, the pathway will be moved forward. Right? The desire for return to God, the desire to return to have a true service of the Creator, and to truly have a revealed consciousness, God consciousness in the world, comes by way of prayer, but comes by way of the preparedness to find a new path forward. The way the viceroy, when he's looking for the lost princess and he's walking on the first path, he's going through forests and fields, and he doesn't find the princess until he looks to the path off to the side, a new path, a path that was not there before, or maybe that was always there and he always walked past it without noticing it. The redemption at the end of days is about that side path, the path that we don't always notice when we're walking around. It's the path that we overlook. But sometimes it's the most obvious path of all. And it's only our distraction and the falsehoods that are foisted on us that prevent us from seeing us. Things are going to get rocky. Tomorrow onwards, going to get nuts. Shall be blessed and to have true meaning in this universe and to find ourselves in the push forward. God bless.